Welcome to the Vault. Yesterday, during my live stream pertaining to the Idaho 4 slangs, I meant to bring you information pertaining to the town. There's a myth that this town is peaceful, idyllic. That's what's been said about it. But it has history. It has secrets. And I'm going to bring you that said commentary pertaining to this alleged peaceful town. The Independent is the source. Why the college town of Moscow, Idaho is not as peaceful as you think. Murders, disappearances, and even mass shootings are part of the legacy of Moscow, Idaho. As a proud University of Idaho alumnus, class of 1986, the former Alumni Magazine editor, among other positions I held at my alma mater, my heart is in a million pieces following the November 13th murder of 4 students. Ethan Chapin, 20, Madison Mogan, 21, Xana Kernodle, 20, and Kaylee Gonzalez, 21, of Rathdrum, Idaho. The lack of any solid leads in the case or persons of interest is frustrating and frankly makes one wonder as to the competence of local law enforcement. Not surprisingly, rumors flourish on social media sites such as Reddit, adding to the fear and paranoia of students and locals alike in the city of Moscow. Everyone is a suspect. News crews from around the world have set up shop in front of the home where the students were fatally stabbed. Fox News spent an entire segment wondering if the first responders had somehow bungled the crime scene evidence. These out-of-town parachuters use words like idyllic and peaceful to describe the city of 25,000 as if wheat fields and wilderness could never harbor such violence. If the reporters had dug a little deeper, they might have discovered that dramatic murders, disappearances, and even mass shootings are a part of Moscow's legacy. On a gorgeous July day in 1991, my boss and I from UI News Bureau walked to the nearby University Arboretum to witness something unimaginable, a young man hanging from a noose in a tree with his hands bound behind him. He had been discovered that summer morning by an 11-year-old who was attending a summer day camp. None of this made sense. Above the deceased man, birds were chirping, squirrels were cavorting, and one could hear the laughter of students in the distance. Because this was a time in northern Idaho when the white nationalist group, the Aryan Nations, was an active presence in the area, and because the dead student was dark-skinned, the local and national media suspected a racially motivated lynching. Soon, our little news bureau office was inundated with calls from national and international media outlets, including the New York Times, Washington Post, and ABC News, and too many others to recall. Satellite trucks appeared in front of our office out of thin air. The problem was, it was not a lynching, it was a suicide by a distressed Middle Eastern student, Sharon Andrew Akavan. For 24 hours, all the media had to go on was a statement by the Moscow police chief, who inaccurately described Akavan as a young Black man. Nor did it help that the local newspaper, the Idahoan, insensitively published a picture of Akavan hanging in the woods on the front page above the photo. Fast forward to a snowy December night, 2001, when my daughter's best friend, Tanya Hart, also 21, answered a knock at her trailer. The last moment in her life was opening the door when she was then fatally shot. David Meister is currently serving a life sentence for the murder. However, he later recanted his confession and instead claimed that Hart's boyfriend, Jesse Shorty Linderman, hired him to kill Hart for $1,000 with a $100 bonus if Hart was dispatched before Christmas. Initially, charges against Linderman were dropped for a lack of evidence, and for a time he continued to live and work in Moscow. On another personal note, a former colleague of mine at the University of Idaho, Phil Metlin, 66, disappeared June of 2008, and to this day has never been found. He was living at the Super 8 Motel in Moscow at the time and left all his personal effects behind, including a vital medication. He has never assessed his financial resources. But there is much more. Let's review. 1999, 25-year-old UI student Will Hendrick vanished after attending a party. 3.5 years later, some hunters found his skull and jawbone. His case remains unsolved. 2007, A sniper killed 3 people in Moscow, including his wife, police officer, and a sexton at the First Presbyterian Church. Jason K. Hamilton then took his own life. 2009. Silas Parks murdered his pregnant wife, Sarah, and then set fire to their home. He was sentenced to 40 years in prison. During sentencing, Parks said, "He failed utterly at my vows as a husband, and I failed as a decent human being. The potential in me to explode is scary. I can hardly believe what I've done. I love Sarah, and I still love Sarah more than life itself. I deserve whatever this court decides to give me." 2011. University of Idaho graduate student Catherine Benoit was murdered outside her Moscow home by former UI assistant professor Ernesto Bustamante, who then died of a self-inflicted gunshot. 2015. John Lee went on a killing spree in Moscow, killing 3 people, including his adoptive mother, and severely wounding another victim. Lee is serving a life sentence for the murders. So many murders and mysteries for one small city. Moscow, Idaho, where I lived and worked for 17 years, is an off-the-grid liberal blue island in a sea of ultra-conservative sea of red. Boise is around 300 hard-driving miles to the south on US 95. The curvaceous road we used to refer to as a goat trail, Spokane, Washington, is 90 miles away on a 2-lane highway. The airport only flies to Seattle and back. Yes, it's a mostly peaceful enclave of groovy coffee shops, long-established food co-op and indie bookstore, all the usual touchstones of a college town. To raise a child here, as I did, feel safe from the faraway urban travesties a child can free range here. Yet that landlocked isolation might be Moscow's Achilles tendon. Like much of Idaho, the city is outside the maelstrom of American currents, and for that reason appeals to isolationists, separatists, and those running away from their past. As the search for the students' killers continues, Moscow's past reminds me that, like many bucolic American verbs, there is often a darker side to that history that one would be advised not to ignore. This commentary was uploaded 3 days ago by Stephen Lyons. So as you see, Moscow has a lot of secrets. A hanging of a young person in a tree. In 1991, July. Very interesting. First said to be a Black person, but not a Black child. How's that? Suicide of a Middle Eastern student, Sharon Andrew Akavan. And as you see, not a Black guy, Black boy, but a foreigner. December 2001, Tanya Hart murdered, opening her trailer door. Allegedly, the boyfriend did it. Confessed, and then claimed that first it says David got life for this crime, but he later recanted his confession and instead claimed that Hart's boyfriend, Jesse Linderman, hired him, to kill the young lady. And this Linderman walked around Moscow, living and working, undetected. I wonder how long. Then there's a Mr. Phil Matlin, 66 years of age. He went missing in June of 2008 and has not been found since and never touched his bank account. Then in 99, a UI student vanished after a party and his skull and jawbone found. That case unsolved. 2007, sniper killed 3 people at a church. Mr. Hamilton, Jason K. Hamilton, took his own life. 2009, a man killed his pregnant wife, set their house on fire. 40 years in prison. Basically saying he can't believe he did what he did, but deserves whatever punishment given to him. Then there's 2011, Catherine Benoit, murdered outside her home by a former UI assistant professor, Ernesto Bustamante, and then he took his own life. And then the killing that they always reference pertaining to Moscow, Idaho, 2015. John Lee went on a killing spree, killing 3 people, including his adoptive mother, severely wounding another victim, serving life for the murders. That would be 7 years ago. So, young woman murdered at her door. Assistant professor murdering a young lady. One would assume possibly they had a relationship. Maybe they broke up. She broke up with him and he killed her. And he killed himself. Missing elderly man. Child hanging from a tree. Almost 40 years ago. Strange happenings. Man killing people at a church. You see, everywhere has secrets. And sadly, after the Idaho 4 slayings, there will probably be more mischief and mayhem that people won't know about. And then one day they will find out. They'll hear a whisper of a storyline. And then one day it'll come to fruition. The murder is still at large pertaining to the Idaho 4 students. No suspects, no weapon. Only a white Hyundai Elantra brought into the storyline. Somebody knows something. As the old folks say, there's no peace in the valley. Obviously, there is not. In Moscow, Idaho, a town of 26,000, a college holding at least 11,000 students. This is a very scary situation. Everyone is at risk in this small, peaceful town, allegedly peaceful. There's no peace right now because there's a mad person on the loose. And whether he or they live in Moscow, live outside of Moscow, a few miles out, or in the state somewhere or neighboring state, they still set foot in Moscow and bludgeon 4 people to death inside of a home. So there is no peace in this small town. And there will be no peace until the killer is brought to justice. And then once again, when everything's all quiet and appears to be back to normal, you'll probably hear of another horrific story pertaining to someone in Moscow, Idaho. Because it's modern day. And people are not well. They're not mentally well, mentally equipped, do not cope well, have vices, deviant thoughts, deviant behavior. That's everywhere. No such thing as, I can't believe that happened here. Why not there? What's so special about Moscow, Idaho versus anywhere else in the United States? The point is, you don't know people. And I'm sure somebody has a story to tell pertaining to every story I just brought to you. They have a version pertaining to who did what and why, the motive. And some of these people, one that's in prison now, possibly still has support from a parent or relative, because people don't always disown people because they committed a heinous crime such as murder. I think most of you know this. They still have support from their family, their friends, their children, and they've snuffed out a person, a child, a family. But yet people still visit, still call, accept phone calls, put money on the books, visit them. The one thing I'm going to say about this killer is that somebody knows him. Whether he is extrovert and talks to people and deal with a lot of people, somebody knows him. Somebody talks to him, speaks to him. And that's the sick part of the story. Possibly they have no idea that they are talking to a murderer, quadruple murderer. And whoever you are, plural, you should be scared as hell. Because if this thing thought it was okay to snuff out 4 kids, what is so special about you? See, that's the point. Nobody is special. Because the reasoning doesn't matter. The motive doesn't matter. Outsiders are curious naturally. But this person has made himself believe that what he did was right. The motive was right. The reasoning was right to him. And we're trying to figure out why. But the why is irrelevant. Because the fact that you can kill more than one person shows you have no empathy. You have no regard for life. You don't feel anything. So it's 4 today, be 6 tomorrow. What's the difference? The Independent is the source for this information pertaining to the unfortunate mishaps that have happened in this town. And I got a feeling if we go past 1986, there might be some other things that are pushed under the rug that nobody likes to talk about pertaining to this small town. Because they wanted us to believe they hadn't had a murder in 7 years. But they didn't mention a missing elderly man, a professor killing a student, another man shooting up people at a church. You all left that out. Why is that? Because you don't want people to think that deep down inside that you do have some rotten people that live in Moscow, Idaho. You always have. You just don't have the news in Moscow every day reporting true crime. But that's the whole point. Crime is crime. I want to thank you all for joining me this early morning. Happy holidays. Please be safe and warm. If you'd like to donate to this great network, $Big Angie, 129 Cash App. All stickers and chats are welcome during the live stream. Later today, I will bring you content pertaining to social media, and it will be a very deep dive into the mindset of many of us. Could you go without social media? If it was to stop today, could you make it? Could you thrive without apps? Social media apps, dating apps, readily having something at your fingertips to see who did what to whom, posting of pictures, photos, videos, live streams. Could you go back to the way things were when there was no Facebook, no YouTube, no TikTok, no iPhones, no nothing? Just good old conversation, calling people on the phone, visiting people, writing letters, holding functions and meeting people at the functions. No announcing it on Facebook. Could you go back? We will see. That's my next live. Thank you so much for joining me. This is The Vault.